The Carnival of Shadows. The town of Meadowbrook was the kind of place where nothing extraordinary ever happened. Nestled in a valley surrounded by dense woods, it was a quiet, unassuming community where everyone knew everyone else, and the biggest event of the year was the 4th of July parade. But all of that changed one cool autumn evening when the carnival arrived. It began with a sound, distant and low, like the murmur of a far-off storm. The townspeople noticed it as they went about their routines, glancing up from their conversations or dinner plates with puzzled expressions. The sound grew louder, a peculiar mix of music and mechanical clanking, until it seemed to fill the entire valley. Then, without warning, the carnival was there. Its tents and attractions appeared overnight in the old field just beyond the woods, a sprawling maze of brightly colored pavilions, towering rides, and glowing lights. A sign at the entrance read, "Carnival of Shadows, one night only." The letters seemed to shimmer, almost alive, as they caught the light. The arrival sparked immediate excitement. Meadowbrook hadn't seen a carnival in years, and the idea of something new and exciting drew people in droves. Flyers appeared mysteriously on every doorstep the next morning, inviting the townsfolk to an evening of wonder and delight. Among those intrigued was 17-year-old Clara Marshall, who had lived her entire life in Meadowbrook and longed for something, anything, to break the monotony of small-town life. Her best friend Ethan was equally eager to check it out. "Did you see the sign?" Ethan asked, jogging up to Clara as she left the town library. "I did," Clara replied, holding up one of the flyers. "It's weird, though. No one saw them setting it up. How does something like that just appear?" Ethan shrugged. "Who cares? It's a carnival. We'll eat some funnel cake, ride the Ferris wheel, and maybe win a prize or two. Come on. It'll be fun." Despite her initial hesitation, Clara couldn't deny the allure. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she joined Ethan and a crowd of other curious townsfolk heading toward the carnival grounds. The first thing Clara noticed as they approached was the air. It smelled of roasted nuts, caramel, and something else she couldn't quite place, something metallic. The music was louder now, a haunting melody that seemed to pull her forward. The carnival itself was dazzling. Strings of lights crisscrossed the pathways, casting a warm glow over the attractions. Performers in elaborate costumes moved through the crowd, their faces partially obscured by intricate masks. A fire breather sent plumes of flame into the air, while a stilt walker towered over the crowd, tipping his hat to wide-eyed children. Clara and Ethan wandered through the midway, marveling at the sights. They played a few games, tried cotton candy spun in impossible shapes, and laughed as Ethan failed miserably at the ring toss. But as the night wore on, Clara began to notice things, small, unsettling details that gnawed at the edges of her excitement. A juggler's balls seemed to vanish in midair, reappearing impossibly far away. A mirror in the funhouse reflected people who weren't there. And then there was the carousel. It was beautiful, its painted horses gleaming under the lights, but the riders, adults and children alike, wore glassy expressions, as though entranced. The carousel turned slower than any she had seen before, the music emanating from it low and mournful. "Do you see that?" Clara whispered, tugging Ethan's sleeve. He frowned. "See what?" Clara gestured toward the carousel. "The people on it. Something's wrong." Ethan squinted but shrugged. "I don't know. It looks fine to me. You're overthinking it. Let's check out the fortune teller." Reluctantly, Clara followed, but the unease stayed with her. The fortune teller's tent was tucked away near the edge of the carnival, its entrance framed by black and gold curtains that shimmered like liquid. A sign above the entrance read, "Madame Velara, Seer of Truths." Inside, the tent was dimly lit, with a single table in the center draped in crimson fabric. Behind it sat a woman in a flowing black gown, her face obscured by a veil. "Welcome," the woman said, her voice soft yet commanding. "Sit. Let me see what fate has in store for you." Ethan grinned, plopping into the chair opposite her. Clara hesitated, but eventually sat beside him. Madame Velara reached for Ethan's hand, tracing the lines of his palm with long, claw-like nails. She murmured, her veil shifting as though she were smiling. "You are bold but reckless. Beware of where your curiosity leads you." Ethan laughed nervously. That's vague enough to fit anyone. Madame Velara turned to Clara, her movements slow and deliberate. And you, child, you have questions, doubts. Your path will take you to places you cannot imagine. Clara's stomach tightened. What do you mean? But Madame Velara didn't answer. Instead, she leaned closer, and for the first time, Clara saw her eyes, dark and endless like twin voids. Leave this place, she whispered, her voice suddenly sharp, before it is too late. Clara and Ethan left the tent in silence, the carnival's lights and music feeling oppressive now rather than inviting. What was that about? Ethan asked, forcing a laugh. She's just trying to scare us, right? Clara didn't answer. Her eyes drifted back toward the carousel, its slow, mournful tune sending a shiver down her spine. Something wasn't right about the Carnival of Shadows, and Clara intended to find out what. The laughter and music of the carnival echoed through the cool autumn night, but to Clara it all felt hollow now, like a facade masking something sinister. Madame Velara's warning haunted her, and every flickering light and cheerful sound seemed to pulse with hidden menace. "Let's try the Ferris wheel," Ethan said, his voice unnaturally upbeat as he tried to shake off the tension from the fortune-teller's tent. "Get a bird's-eye view of this place." Clara hesitated. She didn't want to leave Ethan alone, but every instinct told her to get far away from the carnival. Reluctantly, she nodded, following him through the winding paths. The Ferris wheel loomed ahead, its massive, illuminated spokes spinning slowly against the night sky. Clara couldn't help but notice that the ride operator, an impossibly thin man in a tattered top hat, didn't seem to be taking tickets. Instead, he waved passengers on with a crooked smile that didn't reach his shadowed eyes. Ethan hopped into one of the gondolas, patting the seat beside him. "Come on, it'll be fun." Clara climbed in, her unease growing as the ride began its slow ascent. The lights of the carnival spread out beneath them, a dazzling sea of color. From this vantage point, the carnival seemed even larger than she'd realized, its attractions stretching far into the woods, farther than should have been possible. "See?" Ethan said, gesturing to the view. "Nothing to worry about, just a regular carnival." Clara shook her head, her gaze fixed on the sprawling maze of tents below. "It's not normal. Look at that." She pointed to an area near the carousel, where a group of performers was gathered in a circle. Their movements were jerky, almost mechanical, and their faces, painted with bright, exaggerated smiles, looked wrong. "Creepy, sure," Ethan said, trying to laugh it off. "But it's just an act, part of the show." Before Clara could argue, the gondola stopped at the top of the wheel, leaving them suspended above the carnival. The air felt heavier here, the music quieter, yet more insistent, as though it were seeping into her mind. And then she saw it. Near the edge of the carnival grounds, where the lights faded into the darkness of the woods, a massive tent stood apart from the rest. Its black and red stripes shimmered as though alive, and an unnatural glow emanated from within. Clara's stomach churned as she realized the tent hadn't been there before. "What is that?" she whispered. Ethan followed her gaze, his brow furrowing. "I didn't notice it earlier. Maybe it's new?" Clara shook her head. "No, it was hidden. It doesn't want to be seen." As the Ferris wheel descended, Clara's mind raced. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was inside that tent held the key to the carnival's mystery and its danger. Back on the ground, Clara turned to Ethan, her resolve hardening. "I need to see what's in that tent." Ethan blinked at her. "Are you serious? It's probably just another attraction, a haunted house or something." "No," Clara said firmly. "It's more than that. Don't you feel it? This place isn't right. We need to find out why." Ethan hesitated, his usual confidence faltering. Finally, he sighed. "Fine, but if it turns out to be nothing, you owe me a funnel cake." Clara managed a faint smile. "Deal." The walk to the tent felt longer than it should have. The carnival's atmosphere grew stranger with every step. The music seemed to distort, its cheerful notes warping into something discordant. The lights flickered erratically, and the air grew colder. When they reached the tent, Clara stopped, her heart pounding. Up close, it was even more unsettling. The stripes shimmered unnaturally, as though they were shifting between colors, and the glow from within pulsed like a heartbeat. A sign above the entrance read, "The Hall of Shadows. Dare to enter?" "This is a bad idea," Ethan muttered, but Clara was already stepping forward. The moment she pushed through the heavy curtains, the world seemed to shift. The air inside the tent was thick and oppressive, carrying the faint scent of decay. The glow that had been visible from the outside now emanated from the walls themselves, casting everything in an eerie, blood-red light. Rows of mirrors lined the walls, each reflecting distorted versions of Clara and Ethan. Some showed them as they were, but others twisted their images into grotesque parodies. Clara shuddered as she passed one that showed her with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. "What is this place?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know," Clara replied, her voice trembling. Deeper into the tent, they came to a central chamber where a massive circular mirror stood. Unlike the others, its surface was dark, rippling like the surface of a black lake. As they approached, the mirror began to glow and a figure emerged from its depths. It was tall and cloaked in shadows, its features obscured except for its eyes, piercing and filled with malice. "Welcome," the figure said, its voice a low, chilling rumble. "You've come far, but you do not belong here." Clara stepped back, her pulse racing. "What is this place? What do you want?" The figure's laugh echoed through the chamber. "This is the Carnival of Shadows, where the lost and the curious come to play. But every game has a cost." Ethan grabbed Clara's arm. "We need to go. Now." But the figure raised a hand and the tent's entrance vanished, replaced by solid darkness. "No one leaves until the carnival decides," it said, its eyes burning brighter. Clara's heart sank as the walls began to close in, the air thickening with the weight of something ancient and malevolent. They were trapped, and the Carnival of Shadows had only just begun to reveal its true face. The walls of the tent seemed to ripple like liquid, closing in around Clara and Ethan as the shadowy figure loomed before them. Its eyes burned like twin embers, casting a flickering light that danced across the twisted mirrors. Ethan tightened his grip on Clara's arm. "We need to get out of here," he hissed, his voice strained with fear. Clara nodded, her mind racing. The dark figure had said no one could leave, but she refused to believe it. There had to be a way. Summoning her courage, she stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "What is this place?" The figure tilted its head, a chilling grin spreading across what little could be seen of its face. "This is the Carnival of Shadows," it said, its voice resonating like a deep bell. "A sanctuary for those who seek escape, and a trap for those who stumble blindly into the dark." "We didn't stumble blindly," Ethan shot back. "We were lured here." The figure laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally. "You were invited as all are, and now you must pay the price of curiosity." Clara's fists clenched. "What price?" The figure gestured toward the central mirror, its dark surface swirling like ink in water. "Step into the mirror and you will see the truth. But beware, truth has its cost." Clara and Ethan exchanged a glance. Ethan shook his head vehemently. "We're not stepping into that thing. There's no way." But Clara felt something stir within her, a pull she couldn't explain. The mirror seemed to hum, its surface calling to her like a siren's song. "What if it's the only way out?" she whispered. Ethan grabbed her hand. "Or what if it's exactly what this thing wants? You saw what this carnival does. It twists everything." Clara hesitated, her mind spinning. The figure watched them silently, as if savoring their struggle. Then she remembered Madame Velara's words. "Leave this place before it is too late." The fortune-teller had warned her, but she hadn't listened. Now she had to make a choice. Summoning all her courage, Clara stepped forward. "I'll go," she said, her voice steady despite the terror gripping her. Ethan's eyes widened. "Clara, no. It's the only way," she said firmly, squeezing his hand before pulling away. As she approached the mirror, its surface grew calmer, the ripples fading until it was as smooth and dark as glass. Taking a deep breath, Clara reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed the surface. The mirror was cold at first, then warm, as though it were alive. With one final glance at Ethan, Clara stepped through. The sensation was disorienting, like falling and floating at the same time. When Clara opened her eyes, she found herself standing in a vast, shadowy expanse. The ground beneath her feet was solid but featureless, stretching endlessly in all directions. Ahead of her, shapes began to emerge from the darkness, figures that resolved into people she recognized, the townsfolk of Meadowbrook. They wandered aimlessly, their faces blank, their movements slow and mechanical. "What is this?" Clara whispered, her voice echoing. A voice answered, not the shadow figures, but something deeper, older. "This is the cost of the Carnival of Shadows. Those who come seeking escape lose themselves here, becoming part of the carnival forever." Clara's heart sank as she spotted familiar faces among the crowd. There was the baker who always gave her extra cookies, the librarian who recommended her favorite books. All of them were trapped, their souls stolen by the carnival. "No," she said, shaking her head. "This isn't right. They didn't ask for this." "They chose to enter, as did you," the voice replied. "But you are different. You have the courage to resist. The question is, what will you do with it?" Clara's gaze fell on the figures around her, and a sudden determination took hold. "I'll set them free," she said. "Tell me how." The voice chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "To break the carnival's hold, you must destroy its heart. But be warned, doing so will come at great risk. Are you willing to pay the price?" Clara didn't hesitate. Yes. When Clara stepped back through the mirror, she found herself in the central chamber again. Ethan rushed to her side, relief flooding his face. "What happened?" "Are you okay?" he asked. "I know what we have to do," Clara said, her voice resolute. She turned to the shadowy figure whose grin had faded into a scowl. "You won't win," it hissed. Clara ignored it, pulling Ethan toward the center of the tent. "The mirror," she said. "It's the heart of this place. We have to destroy it." Ethan stared at her, then nodded. "What do we do?" Clara looked around, spotting a heavy iron rod leaning against one of the walls. She grabbed it and turned back to the mirror. The shadow figure lunged toward her, its form shifting and writhing, but Ethan intercepted it, tackling it to the ground. "Do it!" he shouted. Clara raised the iron rod and swung it with all her strength. The mirror shattered, shards of dark glass flying in every direction. The ground beneath them trembled, and a deafening roar filled the air as the carnival began to collapse. The shadow figure let out a furious scream before dissolving into smoke, vanishing into the void. When the dust settled, Clara found herself standing in the middle of the empty field where the carnival had been. Ethan was beside her, his clothes torn, but his expression triumphant. Around them, the townsfolk slowly began to awaken, their blank stares giving way to confusion and relief. "You did it," Ethan said, his voice filled with awe. Clara nodded, exhaustion washing over her. "We did it. The Carnival of Shadows was gone, its grip on Meadowbrook broken. But Clara knew she would never forget the horrors she had faced, or the strength she had found within herself to overcome them.